You've grown up in your organization, some incredible leaders. What would you say is attributed to your growth as a leader and how you pour into those individuals?
You're kind of like a big fish in a small pond. There's a lot of people that are way farther down the line than you on this, and you need to understand that. And if you want to continue to get better, you better push yourself that way. A lot of people are like, oh, go have fun in your 20s. I don't agree with that. If you want to be making good money, be a millionaire, the farther out you can get ahead when you have less responsibilities, the better set up you're going to be. Go after your dreams, get interested in whatever you're in, and be the best at what you're doing at that point, and just go from there. The more leverage, the more momentum you're going to have.
For all business owners, talent is the game.
If you want to run a high-performance business, what makes you think you can do it any different? You have to create that in your own way, but you need a constant experience going on where you're always looking for good talent and trying to bring it in, because it's your culture, it's your company, it's your experience that you're creating.
This is Spartan!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick. Hey, and if this is your first time, or if you've been a long-time listener, I always got to remind you, get the message out there. Like, follow, subscribe, share, do all the things. I always watch my daughters over their shoulder watching the YouTube videos like, before we get started, click subscribe, hit share. So now I'm like, as a reminder, if these little kid YouTubers can do it, I got to do it too. So make sure you spread the message today, because I got a good friend, an incredible leader with me via Zoom, via Detroit, big Detroit Lions fan, which they're going to have a great season this season for once, it looks like. So excited for him, a leader impacting the workforce in not just one way, but through a portfolio of workforce solution companies. I'm excited to have CEO, co-founder, and executive leader at Spark Companies. And not to mention, I got to mention also, incredible father and husband, my good friend, Aaron Opalewski. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me, Josh, and thanks for the intro. I'm happy to be here.
It's going to be a good time. I've got a lot to cover because I got an incredible young leader on the horn. And we got to first off saying congrats on the launch of your new business, Ignite Search. I mean, that's a big deal. You keep adding to the portfolio. So talk a little bit. Let's start there. What is it, and what is the amazing mission that you and your team have committed to?
Yeah, so thanks. We did just launch Ignite along with another company that kind of overarches, all of our different brands at this point. But, we're coming up on 10 years of Spark Talent acquisition. That comes up in November. So we're about 2 months away from that. And, that's something that I started with there's 5 of us, and we started it out of my house and grew it, from there to, where we are today. And it's been interesting to see how God's, worked through what we're doing. Like, that company doesn't have a niche. We work at one point in about 14 different sectors. And over the last, since 2021, what's been happening is we've been cracking off these new companies that kind of take over specific niches for us. So the newest of that being Ignite Search, which does our executive recruiting and then handles a lot of our special projects or kind of net new searches, which is stuff that's we'll basically come in and we already don't have an expertise in that. We'll learn about it and look at, hey, do we have a vehicle to help this client or not? So sometimes we take those searches on, sometimes we turn them down or refer them to other people. But now that we're up to 5 companies, a lot of times we're able to refer kind of within our network, so which is nice.
Which is nice. That's building the verticals, as they say.
Yes.
So that's really good. So you and your various business entities are all focused on the workforce solutions. I know you got a little bit of real estate stuff going on as well, but I want to rewind a little bit. Where did the passion come from? Tell us a little bit about your story from beginning to now, because you have this kind of insatiable urge, as I've known you, to help other businesses and other business owners succeed. So I want to rewind a little bit to hear a little bit where you came from and how it's grown to what it's grown to so quickly.
Sure. Well, I've been in some ways it feels quick, in some ways it doesn't. It kind of depends on the perspective that you look at it from. But I've been in recruiting for coming up on 15 years. It'll be 15 years next month. And so I got into the business in 2007. So I believe that's 15 years. But kind of right before or right as the economy was shifting, it kind of feels in some ways similar to, what you hear going on now, where there's pockets of stuff going well and pockets of stuff that are not going well. Or you look at kind of what's going on in the country and, there's concerning, parts to that. At the same time, we want to be optimistic, right? So it feels similar as to like when I got into recruiting, but I worked for a firm, learned a lot, really appreciative of what I was able to kind of learn from other people there. And the fact that they gave me an opportunity as a kid that was still in college, thought I would stay at that company forever. And, it just didn't pan out that way. They laid off a bunch of people in 2009, consolidated like 4 offices, laid off 100 people in a day. And I didn't get laid off, but they did demote me out of my role. And I wasn't very happy about that. Made that known, didn't really know how to play the political game. Probably wasn't the best timing to be vocal about that with all that going on. And I only stayed for about 2 more months after that. So my perspective on that's completely changed over the last 13 years. And I think the person that had to make those decisions was in a really tough spot and just kind of went with who they knew. But, I got into, the recruiting industry I was basically doing training and managing a gym. And so exercise kind of brought me into the recruiting space, something I still, very passionate about, but I didn't think that I wanted to like run a gym or own a gym or do training forever. I was kind of looking for what I wanted to do, looking for a mentor. And I was able to find that in some capacity in, going to work for this, big organization. They're the largest privately held staffing company in the world. You fast forward at that point and like earlier in my life when I was getting in some trouble, like I'd gotten some trouble and shifted what I wanted to do in life and, just did some things that looking back now, like I got a DUI when I was 21 or 20 and almost 21. And, just got in some trouble, DUI fights, like just, almost arrested multiple times and was looking for what I wanted to do. Was looking for a mentor and it didn't come exactly how I wanted to in the form of one person, but through like a bunch of different people at different times, like I kind of found that within the staffing world, ended up on my own. You fast forward to where we're at kind of now. And, even though I didn't find that one person who was like that mentor in my life, I think God was pointing me in the direction of like down the road, he wanted me to be that for other people. Like I had this deep desire for that, didn't find it completely in one person. But fast forward as we start rolling out these companies and have other entrepreneurs that kind of come under our brands that I get to work with, it's a way for me to provide mentorship, way for me to witness, about my relationship with God, because it's a big part of my life and how I run the businesses. So it's probably a long-winded answer, but like God's kind of taken me full circle on kind of what I had a deep desire for and showed me how, at least in my opinion, how I can be that for other people within the vehicle that, of workforce solutions and staffing.
Yeah, no, long-winded or not, it's a good segue into the person that you are today. And as one of our mutual mentors always talks about, and Ed Milet says, you're best equipped to help the former version of yourself. And I know that you've become an incredible leader within your company and brought on. And what's a great example for everyone listening, you've probably heard me say this before if you've been a long-time listener, but the best example of looking at how someone is as a leader is the leaders that they have around themselves and the leaders that they've grown up. And you've really grown up in your organization, some incredible leaders. What would you say is attributed to your growth as a leader and how you pour into those individuals?
I think, Arte in general has been, a big thing for me to kind of see like different gears to success, how to collaborate with people, how to communicate, how to keep growing as a leader. We have a core value, be humble, crave improvement. And, when I first got into Arate, we had done some good things in business up to that point. Like Spark Talent was, I think we were at almost the 5-year mark. And we had just had our best year ever. It was 2018. And we're on track for our best year ever in 2018. And, I had started listening to Andy's podcast the year before, and I always joke, like, I wish I could have found his podcast in 16, but, God has his own plans. Yeah. But there were some mistakes that I was making in 15 and 16 because we grew so much. And, I've heard Ed say this before, but I kind of outgrew the capacity of what I thought was possible or in my head, or like where I thought I was out ahead of like where I was like mentally at, like from a revenue size and income size, like just what we were doing. And I think that bred some confusion, some mistakes, some bad perspectives on stuff, looking for advice in the wrong places. And that was okay, because you can learn from mistakes, right? And we did. Yeah. But had I found some of that, content from Andy or a group like Arate sooner, I think I could have avoided some of that stuff. And again, I wouldn't trade it, because our mistakes are a great way for us to learn. We have another core value, conquering adversity is the recipe to success. And that's just reigned true in our life. Like, we can learn from our adversities, and our challenges can become opportunities for us if we go put the work in to make that happen. At the same time, it's nice to be able to learn from other people's mistakes. So I think just kind of being open to like, hey, we've done some good things. You're kind of like a big fish in a small pond, but there's bigger ponds, there's lakes, there's oceans. Like, there's a lot of people that are way farther down the line than you on this, and you need to understand that. And if you want to continue to get better, like, you better push yourself that way to understand, like, don't lose your confidence, but understand that like there's so much to learn, and you got a long, long way to go. And I think flipping that mindset compared to like, oh, like we grew the company 800% in the first year, 100% the next year, we're making, 7 figures in net income, and, revenues exploding and all this stuff. Like, oh, like now, like you can just kind of push that up to other people and go off on the golf course all day. That was the wrong mentality. Fortunately, we learned pretty quick on that, right? But like, I just started to view at like 15, 16, started to view stuff as like, man, I put in my time, and now I can delegate this to other people. And there's some truth in that, but there's some real dangers in that, in your approach. And like, people are going to feel if you're not invested in kind of like taking the company forward, they're going to feel that. And for a short period of time, I think I struggled with that. Yeah.
Well, so Aaron and I got to help run and facilitate a leadership session at an entrepreneur event in March. And one of my favorite quotes that he mentioned, to the tune of what he's talking about here, is you got to let your people dent the car without totaling the car. And talk a little bit about what that means to you. I think, for most people, they probably get it, but how does that play out as an example, if you would?
Yeah. Well, I think, let's go back. So 2015, 2016, we're hiring a bunch of people. We're passing off responsibilities. We don't have the right training and development and like mindset set up. Like we're thinking this is easy, right? Because we've done some good things and progressed stuff forward. Now we're just going to inject people into these seats. Keep in mind, this is ironic because we're a recruiting company. And it's like, oh yeah, we're just going to put, basically, you've heard right people, right seats. So we put anybody in the seat, and because it's set up, this is just so easy, and it's just going to keep going. Well, that was not a good outlook. It's not the way we advise our clients now with some of our talent consulting we do. But like, that was the mindset for a period of time. And, within that, then thinking like, oh yeah, we just put them in, it's going to go. And then when it doesn't go that way, being really upset. Like, hey, you put this dent in the car, like, and just going off on people, like, or letting them go, like, without, like, using that as an investment in their knowledge, right? Like, so you fast forward through some of those mistakes we were making, and it's like, look, when we promote someone, you may be delegating certain responsibilities, but like, if anything, your workload probably increases for a period of time with those individuals, because you want to trust people, but you're equipping them first, and then you still need to verify, what's going on. And there's rhythms to that, as, it's like, okay, you do that with a few people. Well, if you do that with 3 people and then you go promote 3 more, you have to do that again. And then maybe there's another layer to it. So like, you got to be on it in regards to like how, like, it's not like you just sit back and do nothing. Like, if anything, as you are scaling on that and giving people responsibility, you got to be working with them. And then you got to be comfortable and set up a system where, like, look, let them make some mistakes and then use those as coaching moments, so that they're learning and you're investing in their future self.
Yeah, really good answer. And I love that you said, you didn't say it in this exact way, but you used the 2 words, trust but verify, right? It's empowerment. It's, but you're also making sure that they, accomplish the task to the degree that you want them to accomplish it at. And I also want to go back just a brief moment. Did y'all hear Aaron spit off a couple of his core values so fluidly? They're always on the tip of his tongue. That's another thing for great leaders, is to always be talking about and exemplifying the core values of the organization that you're running. So I love that you mentioned a couple of yours already. All right. Let's jump right back into the recruiting process. So when I ran the financial firm, recruiting process was a huge part of my life. When I was managing partner, that was a big task of mine, was to grow the organization, to grow the firm, to grow the territory. And, so I was recruiting 40 to 50 a year. We prided ourselves on our recruiting process and the experience that we created. As you know, we're recruiting people from salaried positions to bet on yourself, 100% commission. Yeah. It's not an easy sale, right? It's not an easy thing for someone to make that leap and bet on themselves. And so regardless if you're trying to get someone into 100% commission or you're going to give them a raise from where they're currently at, why do you believe having such a solid recruiting process is so important? And then we'll get into a little bit, I guess, what a solid recruiting process really looks like.
Well, I could probably talk to you on this all day.
I know you could.
But to keep it concise, you look at anything done at a high level from talent aspect, like there's a constant state of recruiting. Like, let's use Colorado football right now, right? That's like the hot thing in football. Yeah. Like, I've never seen a better recruiting system set up. Like, at least I have some friends that think it's too good to be true. I don't know. Like, I think it's a great story so far, but there's like a constant recruiting process going on there, whether it be just the product they're putting on the field, the social media aspect, the donors that like, it's constant and it's at all angles and it's at all times. It's an experience being created. So like, okay, we know that to be true in like high level sports. Like, if you want to run a high performance business, what makes you think you can do it any different? Now you have to create that in your own way, but you need a constant experience going on where you're always looking for good talent and trying to bring it in. And it's probably not the first time like people on your show are going to have heard that, but I would challenge people, like, if you're wanting the best company possible, figure that out. Maybe you do that yourself. Maybe you work with an organization. Maybe it's infused, in between. That's what we usually see set up the best. Like, that's what I would recommend to someone, is some of that. You don't want to completely outsource it to someone like us. We do that, and those are great projects and programs for us, but we generally advise people to stay involved, right? Because it's your culture, it's your company, it's your experience that you're creating. But just being consistent and relentless about it, I think that's the right there. If you want to build a high performance team, like, that's the first half of it. And then the second half is, what is the culture, like the core values? What are you doing to create a great experience once they're working, within the organization, right? Like, to your point, that's a whole nother dynamic on having someone that is maybe leaving a salary, aspect and going to, completely, 1099 or running their own business. Like, man, like you really got to catch someone on the growth curve. Like they got to have a hunger for growth and significance and recognition and just like, but you're looking for that at all times in all areas. And you're constantly trying to get people into your system or into conversations that maybe it's not now, but maybe it's 3 years down the line that they're ready.
Yep. So. And for all business owners, I mean, talent is the game. And you don't want to be waiting to the moment that you need the talent to then figure out what your recruiting process is going to be, go looking for that talent, because all business owners are looking for talent at all times. So you're going to be in major competition if it's not, like what you said, an all the time thing, always infusing in your culture. And what I love about Dion and what he's doing in Colorado is he's telling you what he's going to do, and then he's putting in the work, because his ultimate goal is to show you what he told you he was going to do. Mm-hmm. And so I remember even some of my best friends that are very, very I'm in the football communities, and they were like, oh, he's going to get exposed now that he's on the big time, not at Jackson State. Well, so far that hasn't been the case. Now it remains to be seen. It's been 2 games into the season thus far, but to go in and beat TCU, who played in a national championship game last year at TCU with the most turnover on a team. So to build a culture in a short off season with 60 new players, I mean, it's an unbelievable story. So I'm glad you brought that up. And so you also mentioned outsourcing, right, to someone like you. For those newer to the game, when do you know it's time to outsource talent acquisition and get support?
Really good question. I think there's nuance to it. I think it starts with can you get to it or not, to where you can make it consistent. For a lot of people, they can't, because you're still running the day-to-day business, right? And you got all this other stuff coming at you. And so you might be able to put up a post or something like that, which I do recommend doing. It's better than nothing. But timing on this stuff matters too, especially depending on the role, right? So you put up a post, people apply. If it takes you 3 days to get back to those people, the best people are probably gone because they were urgently looking for work, especially the more entry level the job is, right? So there's something like that. There's the timing aspect. There's doing that stuff. There's maintaining it. There's reposting. That's before you get into targeting the right people, having the post structured right so it gets to the most people. And there we go. We're just talking about a simple post, right? I think as soon as someone's like, man, I can't get to this all, there's something there that they should probably look at. Now, does it mean they should go spend a ton of money on search? No, maybe not. But maybe they should look at, some kind of like mini outsourcing of an area, right? Maybe it's managing that post. Maybe it's facilitating candidates to an interview. Maybe it's running different fractions of the process. Maybe it's none of that, because none of their back end stuff is set up to support retaining anyone they bring in, but there's probably some, and that's a whole nother, you might need to, a lot of times for if a company is under 5 people on the team and they need something, maybe we do a search for them. But a lot of times as we're on that call, we look, we could try and set this up and try and charge you, X amount of money. Maybe it's $20,000, $30,000 on the search. But in the process of this, we're seeing that hey, you don't have benefits set up. You don't have, your PTO, you don't have all this stuff set up that basically when this person's looking, other places are going to have. So even if they go with you, if they're still getting calls and some of these things are important to them, you don't necessarily have even if you're a great person, you're setting up a good culture, you might not have your infrastructure set up. So a lot of times we'll pause on search, say, get your infrastructure set up. So I think as soon as you feel like you can't get to it all, which I think is pretty early in the process, you should talk to someone. I think what people got to be careful of is don't go spend $20,000 or $30,000 on searches if you're not set up to retain those people on the other end. Yeah. I would advise against that, because you're going to have a bad experience. You're going to spend money. You're not going to get the value out of it that you could,
And that employee is going to have a bad experience, because if you're losing them on the other end and then they're talking about you in the community, that's working against everything that you're trying to do and build.
That is correct. Yes.
So
there's a nuance to it.
Well, I love that you brought up the retainment piece, because that was the other big piece of my job when I had 250 people that I was responsible of, is the constant development and pouring into them to make sure that they had a good experience, that they were growing to their fullest capabilities, that we continued to show a path for growth within the organization. And then, of course, you even brought up the simplest of things. What does your employee handbook look like? PTO, benefits, HR, some of that stuff that they need, that these bigger companies have that you may not have as a small company yet. But like, what's your competitive advantage? Excuse me. And if you don't have those basic things down, and they're trying to feed their family, and they need dental insurance, or they need health insurance, or they need some of these simple things, and you don't even have those set up yet, that is a starting point where talking to someone like yourself that knows all those things can say, hey, before you drop $30K finding this executive, get this set up first, and then we'll talk. That's great advice. So I love giving tactical advice like that to the audience. So speaking of getting prepared, you did something powerful recently that I want to make sure that we touch on. As you leaned into the launch of your 5th workforce solution company, you also kickstarted your 3rd round of 75 Hard. And so I really want to thank you today for putting on a sweatshirt and not showing off the gun show. Because for those that aren't watching video, I mean, Aaron's got a sweatshirt on, but dude's got arms. So I appreciate you not showing me up today. But why did you carry the weight of those both commitment? I mean, major commitment, starting a new company, and then anyone that's done 75 Hard before, it's a huge commitment. Why'd you take those both on simultaneously?
I like to challenge myself, number one, but it's my third time doing 75 Hard. I am disciplined regardless of being on 75 Hard or not, but I do think that it just gets you in another gear of being focused. And it's like, okay, we're going to have a lot of stuff coming at us within these new companies coming up. There's a lot of stuff. Like I don't lead those companies day to day, right? I'm still the CEO of Spark Talent and lead that day to day. So I got a lot on my plate with that. So there's going to be curveballs that come up with this stuff. Well, I feel like on the physical and mental side, I'm always good in this area, but I'm at my best if I'm doing, something like this, and 75 Hard is a great program. So why not, it's the perfect time. It's not, from a convenience standpoint, but nothing about being successful in entrepreneurship or, anywhere you're trying to grow, it's rarely convenient. So it was a good way for me to challenge myself and feel like I was going to be in a great mental and physical state while we had that going on.
No, that's awesome. What's been your biggest takeaways each time you've done 75 Hard? Well,
I was talking to my wife about this, Anna, because she's doing it with me this time. And if there's anyone more disciplined than me, it's probably her. It's her first time doing it. She's never done it before, because she's up every day at 4:30 working out anyways. She's got a ton of food allergies, so she's very disciplined on her diet. She doesn't drink already. Like, she's pretty dialed in already. But, we were talking about this the other day. The first time that I did this, I think it opened my eyes to because I don't drink a lot either. I do drink, but not a ton, and probably less and less over the years. But the way that I would kind of get my stress out is eating. I would eat relatively good during the week, but then the weekend would come, and for 1 to 2 days, I would eat pretty bad. And I'm what I would consider now an emotional eater, or I can be. So, in my
stress eating?
Yeah, kind of somewhat and again, it's still relatively controlled down to the weekend, but going out and just smashing a bunch of food on the weekend and then coming back into the week, it'd be pretty lethargic sometimes. And it just opened my eyes to that. It's hey, look, I don't have to use that as my, outlet to dealing with stress going on at work or anything like that. So, yeah. And I think before I didn't really view it like that. I just view it okay, I got a cheat day. And again, I still don't really have a problem with that, but I've gone from, shoot, man, sometimes on a day like that, I might consume 6, 7. I mean, I wasn't counting, but I'd eat a lot of food on a day like that. And I just don't like, I'm more controlled about it now, like being when I'm off program. And I think I learned that on program. So
Yeah.
there's that. And then I think the other thing that I was already good at, but it's just raised it to another level is like, hey, like you can have a lot going on. You can get it all done. You can still make time for your family too. Like you can get done what you prioritize.
No, that's beautiful. Because I've gotten a lot of questions from people that I'm coaching lately about 75 Hard and my journeys with it. And everyone's busy. And that's why I wanted to ask you, because there's probably not many more people that are busier than you. You got family, you got multiple companies to manage. And so people always talk about this work-life balance, and there is no such thing as balance. I prefer to use work-life integration if we're going to use a work-life, common term, if we will. What have you found your best either self-management / time management tools, or just to keep yourself as balanced as possible between family life, keeping yourself physically and mentally healthy, and then running all the businesses?
Yeah. So, I mean, the tactical thing that I've taken away from the program would be since 2021, so I did 75 Hard for the first time in 2020. And when we started our second company, Spark Packaging, in 2021, I took from the phase 1 part of it, you have basically 8 critical tasks in a day.
Mm-hmm.
I call them daily igniters. So I have 5 daily igniters, and those are my tasks essentially tied to Spark Talent, where I run the day-to-day. And then I layer in 3 critical tasks. So that's from that program of having 8 critical tasks. I've done that every week since the beginning of 2021 to now, with the exceptions of Sundays. Sundays are the only days that I don't follow that. But I get those 8 things done every single day, like clockwork, since the beginning of 2021 to today, outside of Sundays. That's kind of my day I'll still do it some Sundays, but that's my day to kind of give myself a little break. But that's something that I framed in, since then. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I wanted to, that's tactically something. And now I'm having to start to evaluate that because, we're now at 5 companies. So when we had 2 and 3, even 4, I could put 1 critical task a day in for each of those other companies. It's still working right now, but I'm starting to have to evaluate, do I need to tweak that? How do I tweak that? But that's another big thing for me. I'm using that every day in how we run this, machine. So to your question on balance, though, one of my podcasts recently got titled as Balance, and it's one of our friends, and I just left the title as is. I'm not a big, it's fine. I'm not a big believer in, I'm not very balanced individual, but I do make time for what's important to me. My family's important to me. My relationship with God's important. My health. And I love what we do here, and just building businesses. I've had to give up some things within that too. I don't really have any hobbies outside of those things. I don't golf anymore. Was never very good at it anyway. So, but I don't play basketball, and I don't play any of my other sports anymore. I'm just I've given that stuff up, and some of that is tough at times, right? And that's my choice. Other people are able to figure that out. But for me to operate these companies, be a parent that's involved, be a good husband to my wife, and do a good job with these companies, have a relationship with God, that's what I have time for.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really important distinction that you mentioned there, because I don't know that a lot of people that haven't been in the entrepreneur game can really understand it. And it's being able to be all in with the certain, or wherever your feet are in that given moment, and the sacrifices that you make to be a high-level entrepreneur, to be successful, to be a great husband, to be a great father. And so there's not a lot of time that is led outside of those activities when you're really focused on achieving something big. So speaking of achieving something big, let's fast forward to your older, wiser self. We're sitting here, you and I, you're younger than me, but let's say I'm 70 and you're 60. I don't remember exactly our age difference, but somewhere around there. We're old men sitting on the porch, and we're talking about all the great things that we've done over the last 30 years. What does that look like for Aaron?
I believe for me to feel that way, the family's still intact and, thriving. So that would be number one. Because I think if I fail as a dad or as a husband, the other stuff just isn't as important. And it's hard for me. I say that by no way am I wired or thinking that way all day. Like, to be honest with you, like when I'm here at work, like I'm pretty dialed in to this. But if we're sitting there on that porch and I failed that way, I probably failed overall. So there would be that. We should have achieved our mission, creating 100,000 opportunities a year. We should have created over 100 millionaires within our, portfolio of companies. And I should have, not through being like overly preachy, but just through the way I operate life and conversations like this, like there's no way we're going to achieve our mission, without God's help. Yeah. And there's no way that that happens where we create 100 million. I'm not saying other people can't do it, but for me, I know a part of that is through what we do, through our performance, through questions that people ask me, inside the business, outside the business, these people that we get to that level of income and wealth, like there's no way that I'm not able to spread my testimony like all over that. And hopefully, whether that brings other people to the Lord directly or just sets a good example, I think that's up for them and God, right? Yeah. But I hope we're sitting there and that's made a big impact in all those ways.
Well, you're doing it
that's
today.
That's what success would look like.
Yeah, and that's awesome. You're doing it today. You're talking about God openly, and that's what I love about this platform is for me, for you, for anyone that we have on here, is to speak freely about what they believe. And it occurred to me as you were talking about, man, that's such a beautiful vision to create 100 millionaires. The narrative around successful people, like, the takers in this world, or even just the media or elitists that talk about business owners in such a negative way. You're not talking about creating this wealth for yourself that you can pass to your kids, which you will inevitably do anyhow. But you're talking about creating wealth for at least 100 other people that are going to change the direction of their lives, their kids' lives, their grandkids' lives. That's what happens with true entrepreneurs, true God-centered people, is they create a ripple effect that lasts generations. And that's what Aaron is talking about. That's who he is. That's who I hope people describe me to be. And that's what true great entrepreneurs do. And so often the media and everything else is bashing people like you and I when we're the change makers in this country. And so I love that you get that out there. I love that you talk about God so openly and your beliefs, whether someone else believes in it or not. Like, that's not our concern. Our concern is about, like, if you want to be accepted as how you are, you have to accept us how we are too, and talk about our belief in God as openly as you and I do. So I love all that, and I can't wait to have that conversation with you over a cigar and bourbon someday.
We're going to say that conversation will have a cigar, our cigars involved.
For sure. Always will, to my wife's chagrin. But it's one of my favorite things is having conversations with friends, because that cigar is going to be, an hour and a half, and we can have some great dialogue like we're having today and try and solve a couple of the world's problems as we do it. So, all right, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I got one last question for you that I always end the show with. What's an unpopular belief that you hold to be true that most others would disagree with?
So the first thing that comes to mind is how you go about your life in your 20s. And trust me, I've made plenty of mistakes. And again, all this stuff we're talking about, like, man, I mess up every day on stuff, right? But so I made a ton of mistakes in my 20s, and there's a lot of things that I would change. But the one thing that I think I got right is that I was all in. I found my vehicle for like how, and I didn't know all this, like, oh, God's going to use me in this way. Like, I wasn't thinking that way at 23 or 22 when I got into staffing. I was thinking, hey, this is a way for me to make money. I can make six figures here. And at that point, that was like my vision for like, I mean, I got to get into a job where I can make six figures. It's expanded, since then, but like, that was the starting point. Well, I was all in on that. I stopped going to school for a period of time, and I told myself, okay, if you're going to stop going to school, I went to school at night from 6 to 10. I'm like, okay, if you're not going to go to school because of work, then you are going to take that time from 6 to 10. You're going to keep working. And I did that, for a period of time. Really, it was about 4 years like that. And then I finally went back and finished my degree. Took me almost 8 years, but I finished.
Van Wilder.
What's that? Yeah.
You were like Van Wilder.
But when I walked across, I'd made well over six figures. I was on my way to, earning, more money, and I had no debt, for my college that I had to pay for. I didn't have any scholarships or anything like that. So it worked out, like that investment worked out. But in my 20s, I didn't let different people coming in and go and sway me from like my vision of like creating a good life, a good income, being career focused. Like a lot of people are like, oh, go have fun in your 20s. I don't agree with that. I'm not saying you can't have any fun, or that you don't want to have some experiences in life. But the best thing that I did is go all in on going after my career. It put me way ahead of the curve. And I wasn't perfect on this, but there was points in time where it's like, man, I'm a single guy. I don't have any kids, but I'm working for my future family. And again, this was not like an everyday thing, but there's points in time where I could get there. And, breakups, things like there's times where that was tough, where it's like, man, like, I don't know, but that was something that ended up working out really well, being able to get in that framework. And it's like, hey, stay committed to what you're doing. Let other people go do their things. Yes, like at that point, like maybe on a Saturday night, I would definitely go out and have some fun with friends and stuff, but I didn't let that topple over into the week. Like I was going to get my stuff done. And that panned out really well by the time I was 30, and I think just got me way far ahead. So when I hear the inverse of that, I would tell people both can be true, but what life do you want? That's what's going to be right for you. If you want to be making good money, be a millionaire, be a multi-millionaire, you want to do these things, you want to grow a business, like the farther out you can get ahead when you have less responsibilities, the better set up you're going to be, the more leverage, the more momentum you're going to have. If you go piss away your 20s, I'm not saying you can't make it work, but you're going to be fighting from behind. And then we get into some of this stuff about how are you present with your family and stuff. I'm not as good of a mentor on that because I didn't live that. I'd worked in my 20s, 16 hours, 20 hours a day, and had no responsibilities except to go out with my friends on a Friday or Saturday night and get blasted, which I don't recommend. But it worked out for me in that time where it's like, dude, I was pounding it for 7 years. And I don't know. It depends what you want out of life. So that would be my one thing is I would go after your dreams. And if you don't know what they are, get a loose understanding and go get interested in whatever you're in and be the best at what you're doing at that point and just go from there.
Yeah. I love it because I think that narrative is so from the myriad of reasons that you gave, I can give a pure financial one, right? If you just look at compound interest, if you don't save a penny in your 20s and you wait till your 30, instead of, let's take 25 to 35, you cost yourself, depending on the rate that you're saving, if you're saying $250 a month, you're now going to have the same amount of money to have the same amount of money as 65. You're going to have to save $1,000 to $1,500 a month, starting at age 35. Like it costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, to not put away in your 20s and wait till you're in your 30s. And so you make it so much harder on yourself on just from a pure financial standpoint, which then you get into some of the stuff Aaron talked about. If you're now waiting till your 30s, now you're busting your ass while you have kids, while you have family, all this different stuff, and you cannot see them because you, like you said, pissed away all your 20s. And now you have to make up for that lost time in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, or potentially have to work into your 70s because, again, you didn't save any money in your 20s. So just from a pure financial standpoint, that advice that people are now floating out there of, go have fun in your 20s and don't do anything really responsible, go live in a van and travel the world. It's really poor advice. And so, and again, for most people, I think you got to really think about that and go, what do I want? And should I take that advice, or should I take Aaron and Josh's advice to actually go hard and make it a little bit easier on yourself longer term? So really appreciate the time, brother, today. Where can people follow you and your companies if they want to?
LinkedIn's probably the best. We're all over LinkedIn, and then at Aaron Opalewski on Instagram and the other platforms, Facebook, whatnot. I think I have one of those Threads accounts. I think people use that for like 2 weeks.
Just to secure their name.
Yeah.
Right? And now you can't get rid of it. So, that's good. So everyone make sure they're following Aaron, following Spark, following Ignite. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Absolutely. Make sure you share this episode, because not only was there great leadership advice, there's great tactical stuff in here for all entrepreneurs and leaders. And can't wait to hang out with you again, brother. Spartans, remember what to do. Share this episode. Remember that good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.